I'm recording.
Cool,
Are
because
you also
that way,
recording?
yes. Now I'm kind of dark. Do I look? It's dark now, right?
I mean, the background looks dark, but
Hold on, is everything running?
Yeah,
Yes.
let me
Zoom
make
recording
sure.
running.
Zoom is...
Audition recording. Yes, okay, I'm ready.
Did you get that? I'm so confused.
Also, ich verstehe nur Bahnhof. You only understand train station? It's all Greek to me.
Understanding Train Station. Living Between Cultures with Josh and Phelan.
Welcome back to a new episode of Understanding Train Station. I'm Feli.
And I'm Josh. And this is kind of a special episode for us because this is now like officially the first episode that we're recording with me in Germany and you in the US, right?
Yep, this is going to be the setup for the future, for the near future at least,
Yeah.
probably in the long run too. So I'm German girl in America right now, and you are...
I'm American boy in Germany. We've been waiting a while for me to be able to say that. And I think I should use this opportunity as well to talk to all of those people in the comments who have asked if I have my own YouTube channel or if I'm planning on opening up my own YouTube channel. Absolutely not. I do not have time for that.
That was a very strong statement.
Absolutely not. I do not have time for that, nor do I have the skills to be able to put together YouTube videos. That sounds like absolute hell. So sorry to disappoint everyone, but that won't be happening.
I'm going to try and have you on my channel every now and then. We haven't done that since we launched the podcast, but I have been wanting to record a video with you about idioms, which we talked about idioms in one of the podcast episodes, but I really wanted to make a video for my channel about that topic too. So maybe at some point in the future, if we are ever in the same country again at the same time or remotely, we can do that. And then you guys can see Josh on my channel at least.
Yeah.
And obviously on this podcast.
Exactly. And I'm definitely open to that type of stuff. Or who knows, like, I don't know if at some point it would make sense to have some sort of video, like, and I can record a couple things here in Germany, and I don't know. Obviously, you guys are still going to see me, but I just wanted to take the opportunity to say and answer that question that no, I will not be having my own YouTube channel, nor do I currently have one.
Okay, there you have it, guys.
So maybe we should jump.
Wait.
Yeah, go ahead.
Before we jump into the topic, I wanted to ask you how it's been, because last week in the episode we talked about your first experiences moving to Germany, being in Munich. How has it been since then?
I would actually say things that have gotten even better since then. I definitely feel like I live here more now as opposed to vacation. It definitely is kind of settling into, okay, this is my new home.
And you started your job too and everything. Yeah,
my job has been up and running, which has been stressful, which also goes into why the thought of having a YouTube channel just is unconceivable at the moment. But yeah, things have been going really well, and despite the lockdown, I've really been able to enjoy my time here so far, and it just makes me more excited for what things will be like after they loosen up the lockdown some and life can hopefully return to normal. But that's a whole nother topic with the delivery of the gosh, it's happening. German is in my brain.
What are you trying to say?
Vaccine. That's the word I was looking for.
Oh, yeah.
It's
Impfstoff,
exactly.
Yeah.
So right now that's kind of a topic in Germany that there isn't enough of it, and trying to get access to people. I was just talking to a friend yesterday who said that his grandma, who's older than 90, still hasn't been able to get it. And that, I guess, in the health department in Niedersachsen, so in what's Niedersachsen in English?
Lower Saxony.
Yeah, Lower Saxony. I guess the health department didn't have the age of the people, so they were looking at the names apparently and trying to figure out based off of people's names how old they would be.
No way.
I don't know if it's true,
God.
but that's what he told me that was his experience.
I really hope that's not true.
Yeah.
That would be so embarrassing if they did that.
Not only embarrassing, but also like super biased.
True, yeah.
Because they were only sending letters for appointments to people who had old sounding names. Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Oh wow, that's insane. Well, also you guys had a lot of snow in Munich.
Yes.
Again,
yes.
There was snow when I was there over Christmas too. There was a lot of snow actually, but there was even more snow. There was even more snow.
Sorry.
Now.
Yes, there was even more snow now. It's actually snowing right now as we're recording. It's been like kind of on and off, and it's weird because like from talking to you and having been to Munich in the past and talking to my coworkers, like I know that there isn't always a ton of snow here, and that is very similar to Cincinnati. But in Cincinnati, we haven't had a lot of snow in the last couple years either. So this is like, this is
2 years ago there was a lot of snow in Cincinnati. There were bad
I guess that's
snowstorms
right.
actually.
Yeah, that's true. But
you say snowstorm, or do you just say like blizzard?
I think you could say snowstorm.
Okay.
Because I feel like a snowstorm is less than a blizzard. A blizzard is worse than a snowstorm. But no, you're right. 2 years ago, there was a decent amount of snow. But last winter, I felt like there was nothing.
Yeah. And I think there was nothing in Munich either.
So this feels like a winter wonderland right now. I know you've posted a few things, and I've seen some of them on social media as well, of people just skiing, like doing cross-country skiing in the streets. So
yeah, like literally right by a bus stop, people are just or like skiing down the street or something.
Yeah, it's been funny for me to see.
Cool.
It's been funny for me to see little kids carrying sleds in the U-Bahn, in the subway.
True, yeah.
Because I'm not used to seeing that
in Cincinnati. Yeah. And then the craziest thing in Munich too is then you see the little kids with their sleds on the subway, and then right next to them you see a person in like what's it called, a Neoprenanzug and a surfboard in their hand.
Oh yeah, and a wetsuit.
Wetsuit, yeah.
Yeah.
Because like surfing is a pretty big thing in Munich because there's this like permanent wave in the Eisbach Creek. And yeah, people surf there even in the winter, even when it's snowing. And there's usually still like 10 or 20 people lined up to get on the wave, which is pretty insane. That's like a Munich thing too. Have you seen any people with surfboards yet?
No, I haven't seen anyone with the surfboard, but I think it just has to do with the subway line that I use, that I don't think it goes towards the Eisbachwelle. No. But no, I definitely have seen people surfing though, which is just ridiculous. Yeah. There are actually some people who got out of their wetsuits and like dipped into the creek to cool down, I guess, after surfing, which was
Eisbaden
insane.
has been a pretty big trend recently. I don't know if it's in entire Germany or just in Munich, but
which is ice bathing in English.
Ice bathing, yeah. I so many like friends of mine on Instagram, I just see them do it all the time.
Yeah.
Like especially this past like
they were actually just talking about it on the radio too. Mm-hmm. I heard a story about them talking about it.
It seems to be this big thing.
But
oh well, I'm sure it's healthy, but I am not going to do that.
No, that's definitely not my cup of tea.
Yeah, anyways, I mean, we're trying to talk about something very different actually today.
Yeah.
I just wanted to see what it's like in Munich. If you guys want to know what it's like in Cincinnati, it's the same as always. No snow, no lockdown, even though I'm kind of thinking that there should be one. And I'm actually currently in quarantine because I was in touch with a person who was tested positive for COVID afterwards. And I'm quarantined. I don't have anything yet. So I'm kind of hoping that it's going to stay like that.
Yeah, no symptoms or anything. So
no symptoms yet. But it's been like 4 days. So I'm really just crossing my fingers that I didn't get it, or if I got it, I'm not actually going to get sick. So
yeah, and who knows? Maybe you were asymptomatic sometime earlier in the year, and maybe you have antibodies. That's the crazy thing right now.
Possible, definitely possible.
Hard to pinpoint everything, but the good news is you're feeling fine now, and hopefully it continues that way.
Yes, but today we want to talk about a very different topic. We want to talk about dialects/accents, both in English, or in the US to be more precise, and in Germany, or in the German-speaking world. And actually, my very first topic that I would like to bring up is the difference between a dialect and an accent, because to me, there's a pretty clear difference between the two. However, I feel like in the US, people do use the word dialect and accent differently.
Yeah.
In my understanding, I would say that many people use it wrong, because of course I feel like we use it correctly in German. And also like if you look at the definition. But do you have the same experience? Because I always feel like many Americans use the word dialect when they really just mean accent.
That's interesting that you say that, because from my American perspective, I feel like a lot of the times it's the other way around for me, as I'm used to Germans saying, like when I speak German, they say, oh, you don't really have much of a dialect, but they're referring to my American accent that I would have.
Oh, people say that?
Yeah.
Really? I've never heard that. Okay.
Yeah. So for me, an accent is just the way that you pronounce words.
Yes.
As opposed to a dialect being some difference in grammar and also your word choice. And that's my working definition of the difference between the two. Did you happen to look up the definitions?
Yeah, that's the definition. I mean, there's different phrasings for the definition, but basically an accent can be both a foreign accent or an accent within the country. So accent really mostly refers to the pronunciation of certain words. And then a dialect, I mean, of course, there's no clear line between the two. Like it's a transition, it's a spectrum.
Yeah.
But basically a dialect would be like a sub-language that is part of that other language, but it has some different vocabulary, some different grammar rules, even some different pronunciation. So it's a lot stronger than just an accent. I just think that in the US, there's many accents. And for example, it's like the Southern accent or Midwestern accent. And I just hear a lot of Americans refer to that as a dialect, even though like there really isn't a whole big variety of vocabulary that these people use.
Mm-hmm. No, I definitely would agree. And I think it's like you mentioned, at least in my notes, the big comparison is between Germany and the US. And obviously there's a difference when it comes to British English and English there. I definitely think there's more dialectal.
Yeah, for sure.
Dialectal
I mean, there
differences.
there are dialects in English, of course, and there are dialects within the US.
Exactly.
I just sometimes feel like people use that word too soon in the US.
That's possible,
that is my
yeah.
personal experience,
to be honest,
though.
and my personal experience in the US has been that people don't really talk about dialects as much as they talk about accents. And then if they're talking about dialects, it's in the case that you're referring to. I definitely think, though, like you were saying, there are some grammar differences in American English in and of itself as well. I think back to a couple of stories, and I'll get into this further on into the episode, where I worked with some people from other regions of the United States, and some of the phrases that they used I'd never heard before. And to me, it just sounded like uneducated English, but it definitely is an established thing in their region that people say. So it's part of their dialect. But that's another thing I was going to mention too. And standard versions of the languages are in and of themselves a dialect. It's just a dialect that was chosen to be standardized, that everyone then has to
or
learn.
not even just chosen. Like in a lot of cases, it's just accepted as that just by like how people use it publicly, like how the media uses the language. But as you said, in a lot of cases, dialect is looked at as like a less educated version of the language, because like as someone who grows up with the standard version of the language, you're used to certain grammar rules. And obviously as a non-native speaker too, you like learn these grammar rules in school. This is how you speak English. This is how you phrase a question in English. And then in a lot of the dialects, people have different grammar rules or just don't use those grammar rules, and then you feel like, oh, they're using wrong English.
Yeah.
Which is definitely something that a perception that I grew up with listening to like hip hop or something. I would always think, oh, like all those rappers, those American rappers, they're using wrong English. But, in reality, a lot of it is just slang and or like things like Black English or certain dialects or regional
differences. Regional differences, regional idiosyncrasies, which I think it's funny that we're talking about this episode, because in the last episode where I was talking about my move to Germany, there was some comments about my pronunciation, and I don't know if you saw them, but my pronunciation of the L in the middle of a word. So it's a dark L in English. There's a difference between a L and a O sound in English. And I guess sometimes I don't pronounce the dark L very clearly. But maybe that's just part of my idiosyncrasies of the way that I speak English. But it's just funny that we're talking about pronunciation and accent and dialects after having had those comments in our last podcast.
And then also there's many people who think that you have a German accent when you speak English, and there's just all these people listening to us have their own opinion on the way that we speak.
Yeah.
I mean, you definitely don't have a German accent.
When I told my family that, they thought it was hilarious. So maybe we should go ahead and just jump in then. What we were thinking, the way that we want to structure this is I think we're just going to give you guys an overview of kind of what some of the different dialects / accents there are in each country, And then for a future episode, we have an idea that we'll tell you guys about at the end of the episode. So make sure you listen to the end, and it's something that you guys will be able to participate in. So let's go ahead and just jump into kind of the list of accents and dialects. What do you think, Faylee?
Yeah, let's do it. But you're the one who prepared a list. I don't have a list prepared.
Well, yeah, I have a list. And should we start in the U.S.? Or do you want to start in Germany?
I would say there's definitely less in the U.S. in my understanding.
Yeah, I would agree. So maybe we should start just with the general American accent, which I would say is basically what I speak.
Is there like an official term that calls it general American? Mm-hmm. Okay,
Yeah.
I didn't know that, because I just know that in German we have this thing called Hochdeutsch, or Standard German, where like everyone just knows, okay, this is the standard German pronunciation. In the US, when I first came here, people explained to me that the Ohio accent, or like, I think like more northern Ohio even, is what narrators and people on the media are taught, or that's how they are supposed to speak. So I thought it was interesting that there isn't even like a perception of like, this is the standard. It was more like, yeah, this regional accent, this is how they try to speak on the national media.
Yeah, I mean, I always grew up like hearing stories that like newscasters were sent to Cincinnati to learn our accent.
Oh, it was actually Cincinnati?
That's what I was always told or always heard growing
Okay,
up.
I kind of thought it was more like northern Ohio, but maybe I'm wrong about that.
I would guess it's not northern Ohio, because to me they have a very distinct accent in northern Ohio as opposed to southern Ohio. But everyone will say the same thing about mine as well, probably. I obviously speak with a very heavy Midwestern accent. But the interesting thing about general American from some of the research I was doing is that it really isn't as geographically localized as a lot of the other accents. So the U.S. is such a big country, and we haven't been speaking English for as long as, I don't know, German in Germany, you know? So the country expanded so quickly that there aren't as many regional accents and differences as you have in a lot of European countries. But yeah, generally my accent is what I would say is the standard, more or less, of the way that people speak in the U.S. A quick fact that I was trying to do some research, because as we were saying, it's hard to define what an accent is or what a dialect is. I keep saying accent when I mean dialect. But from some research, according to PBS, which is it's the public broadcasting service in the US, there's anywhere between 3 and 24 dialects in the US. So it really just depends on how you define it, which we're not going to get into all of those. I would say that really there are 3 main accents or dialects in the US. I'd say you have your New England, you have your Southern, and then you have the rest.
The rest?
That I would pretty much say that's generally the way it works out. And like I'm saying, that's a huge overgeneralization. But maybe talking about some of the Northeast. You've actually been to the Northeast, right? I haven't.
Yeah, I honestly didn't really notice it a whole lot. Like, the thing is, so of course there's like a Boston accent, and then the Boston accent is supposed to be very different from the New York accent. I don't even, like, I just looked it up earlier. I tried to like figure out why I didn't notice it when I was there. It's just, there's an accent, but you really, for me as a non-native speaker, you really have to pay attention to it, because it's not hard to understand at all, for me at least. So, it's just a slightly different pronunciation, a little more British in a way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I would say the main factor that makes it sound more British is the fact that they drop R's at the end of words oftentimes. I'm trying to think of maybe a good example.
Isn't there like this one Boston sentence? I think someone commented that even, like, did you park your car in Harvard Yard or something? I can't do it at all. But
it's more park your car in Harvard Yard.
Really? It's like that?
Yeah,
That's not what I listened to earlier on YouTube.
It's more park your car in Harvard Yard. Yeah. But I don't know. Bostonians will probably say my Boston accent is horrible. But at least that's what it sounds like to me. Mm-hmm. So they don't pronounce the hard R. I would say park your car in Harvard Yard. Yeah. What else is there? Oh, that's what I was going to ask you. Were you able to hear the difference between the Boston and the New York accent? Or
Not at all. I wasn't even able to detect that there's a Boston accent because, like, as I said, like as a non-native speaker too, you're kind of used to like over time you need to be able to understand people from different regions. Like you can't just, be focused on one certain pronunciation of things. So I don't really notice those. To me, the Boston accent when I was there was very light. And also what I looked up earlier on YouTube when like people were teaching each other how to use the Boston accent, I was like, I mean, yeah, I can hear that there's a difference, but it's very, very minor in my perception. I know it's a big deal to them, but it's really just a couple of things that they do differently. And it's very easy to understand still to me.
Yeah.
So I did not even notice that was a strong accent or anything.
Yeah, and I think that's true with most of the American dialects. There are some dialects that are more difficult to understand, but compared to the way that things work in Germany with dialects, there's no comparison in my opinion.
Yeah, and I mean, like, I'm happy when I can understand everything. So, like, I was fine. And I personally do not really hear the difference between a New York and a Boston accent. But also, I've only been there to visit. So maybe if I lived there, it would be a different story.
Yeah, I mean, me as a native English speaker, I definitely hear a difference between the two.
So what's the New York accent like?
To me, it's more of a... I can't make... I'm so bad at imitating it. But, like, I guess they use more diphthongs. So like water, the wa sound is very New York to me. Like, I think it's actually called the thought consonant or thought vowel, not consonant. So like they'll say thought instead of thought, or they'll say coffee instead of coffee, which I'm really exaggerating it. Most people in our generation don't say it as extreme as I just said, like coffee. But that's definitely very New York. So if you hear more of a wa sound, that's why Bernie Sanders, like, he's your typical New York accent. I'm trying to think of some other things that are typical New York that differentiates them from Boston. Like I'm walking here, or I'm walking here. Okay. Because they don't pronounce the R at the end of here. But that's I think it's an interesting point that you were making too, is the dialects in the East Coast, at least of the U.S., I feel like are not as prevalent as they used to be, just because of media. They're definitely starting to become more standard. It's mostly, and I was talking to one of my roommates actually here who studied linguistics, and he said that in a lot of linguistic studies of dialects, researchers will look for, he called them norms. I don't remember exactly what it stands for, but it's like non-mobile rural male. Because those are the people who tend to speak with the heaviest dialect because they don't have as much contact with the outside world, quote unquote. And he was saying that I guess women just tend to adjust their speech more to the way that other people speak. I don't know if that's truly 100%. I don't have any facts to back that up, but that's what he was telling me.
Yeah, interesting.
So...
I could see that be true. Also, a disclaimer for this entire episode. Obviously, neither of us are linguists. So we're just kind of, we did some background research and we're just talking about what we know, what our perception is, what our experiences are. So please don't hold us accountable to any facts that we're giving you in this episode. It might be wrong.
I'd say we're mostly just giving you kind of our personal experience with the way that we hear things, and kind of tidbits of information that we've picked up along the way.
Yeah, so besides the New England and New York accent, obviously I know that like the Southern accent, that's like usually the one that I mention first when I talk about American accents. That's like a very strong one and also like an accent that's known internationally, I would say.
What does a Southern accent sound like to you?
I'm not going to try and imitate it, but no, I can't because I haven't like listened to it and I recognize it when I hear it right away, and I know it's hard for me to understand. So like unlike the Boston or New York accent, I do feel like this really makes it hard for me to understand the people sometimes. So it's a struggle for me, but I can't imitate it at all.
But yeah, one thing that's interesting, there are a couple different...
I mean, it's a lot about the vowels, though.
Yeah,
just
it is a lot about the vowels.
A lot about the vowels. Obviously, like, vocab, too. Not in a strong way that you can't follow them anymore, just, like, the word choice.
Yeah, it definitely jumps out at you. You're like, oh, that's an interesting... Like, you don't expect sometimes the words that they use. Like, I wrote down, for example, buggy. if you go to the grocery store in the South, oftentimes you would use a buggy, and what they're referring to is what I would refer to as a grocery cart or
Or a
shopping
shopping
cart.
cart.
Shopping
Yeah.
cart is what I would call it. And I think in the
Yeah.
UK they call it a shopping trolley.
Okay.
But yeah,
Yeah.
so like you hear, oh, buggy. Like when I hear buggy, I normally think of like an old car.
Yeah, then you hear like a lot of, like religious influences in their speech, like,
Bless.
God or bless you. Yeah, like those kind of things. A lot of darling and honey. And
Yeah.
what are those other
Kind of pet names, if you will.
nicknames that they call? Yeah, pet names.
Oh,
Just a lot of that. Like a lot of like
sweetie,
sweetheart.
yeah,
and,
honey,
Yeah.
sugar. Yeah, a lot of those type of things. That's definitely what I associate with more of the Southern accent. I think it's also...
Can you imitate it? Sorry.
Oh, gosh, now you're putting me on the spot. I was trying to get you to imitate this one.
Nope.
It's no offense in my imitation is meant by any means, but like, howdy y'all, how y'all doing down there? The thing is, I have family in West Virginia, and the West Virginia more Appalachian accent is different than the deep South. So it's a lot more twangy. And when I mean twangy, I don't know how to explain twangy. How would you say twangy in German?
I don't know if I would be able to translate that. Like, I would say like a twang is about like the vowels. It's about like the
Yeah. Yeah, like when I think of
how would I describe that in German? I don't know.
For me, an Appalachian accent is definitely more twangy in the sense of it's like up here in the mountains, we're talking like this. And then in the South, in the deep South, I feel like it's a little smoother in the sense of how y'all doing. Like we're more Matthew McConaughey, all right.
But they still do have a strong twang, though.
Definitely. And I think there's a thing called goose fronting, which don't ask me how to explain it, but it's definitely something I've heard about that is very typical of the Southern accent. One thing that's definitely a more dialectal difference is the use of might could. So I actually used to work with some people who were from Tennessee, and I asked my boss, he was from Tennessee, and I asked him, hey, what do you think about this idea? And he said, yeah, we might could do that.
See, I've never even heard that.
Yeah. And it was the first time.
Entirely new to me.
It was the first time I had heard it too. But then I asked other people who were from that region, like, I was like, he said might could. And they're like, oh yeah, might could is completely normal. Like we might could do that.
Do you know if they say it in a serious way, or is it more like supposed to sound a little funny?
Oh no, he said it 100% seriously.
Okay, interesting.
I think if he were writing, he would have maybe used the standard version, which would have been we might be able to. But no, he's 100% serious. Said, yeah, we might could do that.
Another thing that they do in the South is the this thing where like when a word ends in ing, they don't pronounce the G.
Yeah.
I think you might have written that down too, but that's like something that I think many Germans know too. When you say instead of writing, they say writen.
Yeah.
Or like I don't know if I said that correctly.
No, I'd say writin'.
Writin', yeah.
One thing that, at the same place where I was working, when I heard might could for the first time, was I was asking my coworkers what they were going to do for the weekend, and they said, they'd been talking about going hunting, I think. And I said, so are you guys going hunting this weekend? And they said, no, we're not going hunting. We're going hunting.
Yeah.
So that's definitely a difference that you hear in the South more than you would in the North. And I think it's true in Germany too. Yeah, there's mostly a difference in dialects, I'd say, between metropolitan areas and the rural areas. So this place where I worked wasn't too far out of the city, but there were definitely more people from the country who worked there than there were city slickers like me. So you definitely heard more twang, more rural sounds than you would when you're talking with more people who were from the city.
Let's maybe keep going with the different American dialects / accents. Was there any other feature of the Southern accent that we wanted to talk about? You wrote down Coke. Like so the funny thing is with American dialects / accents, in Germany, as we talked about, there are just so many different dialects and accents that using different vocab, even within just two neighboring villages, or especially two different cities or regions, or in between North and South, we're just so used to using different words for different things.
Yeah.
And like for certain things, there's like 20, 30, whatever different words for one specific object. Like I think I even read that in Baden-Württemberg alone, there's like 60 different ways to name this one object. I forgot what it was. And Baden-Württemberg is just one of 16 states in Germany. So I always find it really cute that in the US, there's like maybe five to 10 words.
Yeah, I was going to say 5 or 6 words that people will like, get so excited. Oh, they say it different here.
Yeah. And it's like, but those words are then really said differently in all the different regions, I feel like. So what you wrote down was Coke. And so you were referring to that in some regions, people say soda.
Yeah.
In some regions, people say pop. And then in the South, apparently, they just say Coke for all soda, right?
Yeah. What type
Which is really funny.
You'll say, I'd like a Coke, and they'll say, what type? Or
and
what
then you
kind?
say Coke?
I don't know.
Say?
I don't know. I haven't
Coca-Cola.
experienced that, but I've heard that that's definitely something that happens.
Yeah. And then you say pop.
So soda, I would say, is the general term that all Americans would use.
Yeah.
And then pop is definitely more of a Midwestern thing, and then Coke
I was wondering
is a Southern
is
thing.
it like for the entire Midwest, or is it more Ohio specific?
No, I'm pretty sure it's all of the Midwest.
Okay.
For me, I kind of use pop and soda interchangeably, but pop doesn't sound weird or to me at all. So it's definitely a Midwestern part of my speech, which is, I think, good to move on to. Maybe the kind of upper Midwest accent is the only one that I really had left to talk about, because most people know it from Fargo. But did you have anything to add to the Southern accent?
Well, I wanted to say, like, not to the Southern accent, but speaking of like pop and soda, we also haven't mentioned the whole like gym shoes or tennis shoes thing.
Yeah.
That is also just a difference between the Midwest and the rest of the U.S., or
I actually think
other
it's,
variations?
From what I've seen on online, there are different like tests that you can take, and they try to pinpoint where you're from based off of your answers. I don't know how accurate they are, but what I did, one of the questions I think was, what do you call the shoes that you exercise in? And to me, I call them gym shoes. I know a lot of people will call them sneakers or tennis shoes, but I call them gym shoes. And what they said, what the chart showed, was that it was in Cincinnati and Chicago that we call them gym shoes. So it wasn't even
just 2 cities.
Yeah, it wasn't even in all of the Midwest thing. It was those 2 cities. So if you're if you're not from one of those cities and you say gym shoes, it would be interesting for us to know. So let us know down in the comments.
Yeah, all the Americans listening, especially if you're from the Midwest, how do you call them? So I guess most of the country then calls them tennis shoes. And from what I heard, it's the East Coast that calls them sneakers.
Yeah, that definitely would be my experience as well. I've never actually heard anyone seriously refer to them as sneakers in my life. Maybe on TV.
I mean, in Germany, we say that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we don't usually use the word sneakers for like those tennis shoes, if that makes sense.
True.
But maybe that's just my personal perception, but I would call like a sneaker is like the kind of tennis shoe, quote unquote, that you use that you wear for fashion reasons.
Yeah.
And then like the running shoe kind.
Yeah.
We would probably just call Laufschuhe or Sportschuhe or tennis Schuhe as well.
Yeah.
But probably wouldn't call those sneakers. I think the
you might be
sneakers
right
are the
in the
cool
use
ones.
of you might be right in the use of sneakers as well. I'm not cool, so I don't know what they're called.
Yeah, I'm not. I mean, this is the case in Germany.
Yeah.
I am not sure if this is the same in the U.S.
I think you might be right.
No.
I think you might be right.
Okay.
But if you're from the East Coast, let us know.
Okay, so then moving on to what you wanted to talk about, the northern.
Yeah, I didn't really have a
accent.
ton to say about the Midwestern accent, because, like I said, most of the Midwest speaks like I do.
Yeah, and I mean, so you guys do pronounce the R pretty strongly.
Yeah.
The American R, which is, I think, something that Germans would say is typical American or typically American. It's also something that, some people have complained about when I speak, like, oh, she's doing the R way too hard. Like, she's trying to be American so hard. What am I supposed to do? I just live here and I listen to the people around me, and you just pick it up naturally. It's really hard not to.
Definitely.
And I've never personally spoken naturally in a British accent because I've
Yeah.
never lived there. I used to speak in like, a German or classroom accent.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm not trying. It's just
Just happens.
just how people speak around me. Yeah.
That happens to me in German too sometimes with the CH. So like for me, naturally, I tend to say durch, which means through in German. But because I live in Bavaria and work with a whole bunch of Bavarians, sometimes every once in a while, without me thinking about it, a durch will come out.
Yeah,
Which-
that's like one of the many, many differences between Bavarian dialect and standard German is
But
durch.
back to the Midwestern accent. The further north you go towards Canada, the more extreme it gets. So like Wisconsin and Minnesota are two of the states that are really known for having more of a upper Midwestern accent. Like you betcha. Like they have like this funny little, it sounds very flat to me. Like for example, A's tend to be pronounced like they do in Northern Ohio as well, like accent or a bagel or a bag.
Yeah, that's a thing that I apparently picked up in the very beginning. I think I've told that before in one of the episodes. When I first came to Cincinnati, I had 2 roommates who were from Cleveland. And I mean, that was like the first time that I lived in the US. So I just picked up everything naturally. I didn't even notice any differences. And apparently I picked that up from them. And apparently I said like bag. I don't even know bag. How do I say it now? Bag. I don't even know now that I think about it. But yeah, and I think with accent, I definitely did that a little bit.
Yeah, so
And I might still do it. I don't know.
Yeah, so I naturally would say bag, but in the north they
bag.
tend to say more bag. And I would say bagel, and they say like a bagel. I don't know. It's slight. It's probably. I wonder how difficult it is for like our non-native English speakers to hear the difference, but it's a slight difference. One area in the U.S. where you might have some trouble, besides just the general South, is Louisiana. Louisiana has a very specific accent because it's like a mixture between Southern and like a Creole, like Cajun French accent. So we say...
Yeah, but that's only in certain areas
Yeah.
of Louisiana, though.
Yeah, exactly. But like my perception is the Bayou, people from the Bayou are difficult to understand.
From the bayou?
Yeah, a bayou is, according to Wikipedia, a body of water typically found in a flat, low-lying area. So down in the southern, in the South, in Louisiana, they have the bayou, and people who are from that area can be sometimes difficult to understand, even for me.
Yeah. And so like Cajun, I mean, Cajun is it's probably more like a dialect because I know it has influences from the French language as well. But Cajun is also like used for different, like cultural or food related terms. So you might know Cajun fries or Cajun as a seasoning, or I think that's also something that's actually known in Germany. So just as a reference for those kind of people. Yeah.
Yeah, no, the Cajun seasoning is definitely something that's pretty well known, at least in the U.S. But yeah, and that's a good transition for us because I don't really have much else to say about American accents.
Wait, what about like Texas or California?
See, I don't feel like they have... I mean, Texas to me sounds Southern. I know that there is a very specific
Southern,
Texas accent, but I don't really recognize a huge difference between Texas and other Southern accents. But that's just me personally. I know that linguists will tell you that it's probably... the difference is night and day, but I just don't personally perceive a huge difference.
Yeah. And then like, I mean, California, you have like this valley girl kind of cliche.
Yeah, no, I would agree. But I feel like that's also just more of like an accent and less of a dialect. And it's also, I feel like, kind of just like a cultural movement that's been taking place over the last couple decades. When I was thinking about like what accents or what dialects to talk about, I was trying to think like West Coast. What is like typical West Coast for me? And I feel like there are a lot of archetypes. So like the surfer dude accent or the valley girl. But those are just like, I feel like the way that people talk in those certain like groups. But I guess technically that's a dialect or an accent because they use terms that I wouldn't use otherwise.
Yeah, and it's come over. I mean, at least like the valley girl thing, I think is what many Germans would think of a stereotypical like sorority girl type of person who will, keep her voice up constantly. And I know that I do have that a little bit. I mean, as I said, I came to the US and I was surrounded by certain people and I just picked certain things up from how they talked. Also, I do naturally use tons of filler words in German as well, but in English too. And so I do use like a lot in my sentences, which is not just something that I picked up here in the US. Again, I do that in German too.
Yeah.
It's just the way I speak. But yeah, so I kind of have that a little bit. Well, another thing that we should mention, I think, is Black English.
Yes, definitely.
Which is its own dialect, but it's not connected to just one region. I mean, it kind of used to be. Like, obviously, this all has a lot to do with American history and slavery. And I don't want to get too much into detail because I don't think I know enough to talk about all of this. But it's a dialect that also has many, many different names. I'm just going to call it Black English because the other names are very long.
Yeah, one of the other names is African American Vernacular English.
Yeah, exactly. And many Black people, African American people in the United States have kept that, depending on where they moved. It's kind of like a cultural dialect in a way. Not all African Americans speak like that. Some people can switch back and forth. Some of them choose not to speak like that. Some people would argue that it's a symptom of, suppression or trying to integrate themselves, that they drop that accent or dialect. Basically, it's something that you'll encounter wherever you go in the US, I would say. And I'm sure there's regional differences within Black English too. I personally don't hear those differences because I feel like the dialect itself is already pretty strong.
Yeah.
And it is somewhat related to or connected to the Southern accent.
Very much
which
so.
also makes sense just historically. Yeah, it's very similar. But then again, there's like it's even stronger, I would say, in a way, and it has a lot of slang in it usually.
I would even venture to say that it's probably the clearest dialect that you'll find in the US compared to standard English, because there are established rules in it that don't exist in standard English. Like, for example, like just a few, I guess, highlights of what is typical Black English that you'll hear is the replacing of a TH with a D sound at the beginning of a word. So instead of saying this, sometimes you hear dis, or what's that, what's dat. That's something that's more something that you'll hear in African American vernacular English. Other things, a TH at the end of a word sometimes is replaced by an F. So I definitely have heard people say whiff as opposed to with. And then something that you'll hear is also, it's a different grammatical case. And like I said, I'm not a linguist, so I don't know the best way to explain it. But you'll hear like someone will say, he be working, instead of he is working.
And also they just, in a lot of cases, ignore the third case singular conjugation and just say, okay, what's a good example? I can't come up with an example. He go instead of he goes. That probably wasn't a good example, but you know it from like songs and stuff like that. I know that many Germans have heard it before where they were like, wait, isn't it supposed to be does? And then they say he do?
Yeah.
Like, what am I doing wrong in my English class?
Yeah.
So, and then also they have those things.
Get my hair did.
Oh, yeah, true. Yeah, that's a thing too.
Uh-huh.
And then they also have, I think they have it in the Southern accent too, or dialect, with the double negation, right?
I ain't got no money, or I can't get no satisfaction is a line from a song as well.
Yeah.
Which is
so there's a lot of specific things to both Black English and the Southern dialects and accents. But yeah, with Black English, it just seems like it's even stronger. And for me as a non-native speaker, definitely hard to understand in some cases, which I feel bad because this is just an American person trying to talk to me and I can't understand them. This will be the case with other dialects too, of course. But as you said, the Black English is kind of like one of the strongest and most common dialects in the US. So that has happened to me several times. And then I feel bad because I'm like, I have to ask them several times to repeat their sentence.
Yeah.
And sometimes it doesn't get better and I just have no clue what they're talking about. They might use different terms too that I'm not familiar with. And sometimes they also do this thing where they drop the ending of words in a way that makes it even harder to understand what the word was as a non-native speaker.
I know that feeling all too well from Bavarian.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
Definitely.
So with that, should we move to
Jump across
the
the
German
pond?
dialects and accents? Yeah.
Yeah. No, let's do it. Do we want to start in Bavaria since that's where we're most comfortable, or do we want to
I mean,
work
do
our way
we?
to
Okay,
it?
let's start with how many there are, because we said that for the U.S. and I mean we couldn't really give you a clear number for the U.S. and we can't give you a clear number for Germany. I don't know what you looked up, Josh, but I know that I've read so many different numbers before. I've read that there's over 100 dialects within Germany. I read that you can classify 20 different dialect groups or families or whatever they're called in the linguistic language. As I said earlier, like in Baden-Württemberg, apparently for just one word, they could classify 60 different expressions or something like that. So there's a lot, to say the least. How did you find a number?
I found the 20 number is kind of what I saw as the recurring number as far as talking about dialects. But like you said,
but
I think
that's really like the
dialect
family. I
groups,
think they kind of classify, I think within Bavaria, they only classify two different dialects, which obviously is not true at all. Yeah. So it's, just very...
It's a really finicky thing. It's really hard to nail down a number. Especially, and we're just talking about Germany right now too, which is crazy to think that in the German-speaking world, Germany is kind of like the standard. Most people there speak more standard. But then if you look at like Austria and Switzerland, dialects are much more prevalent there, I would say, than they are in Germany.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, as we said earlier, just historically in Europe in general, and Germany is just one example for that, or the German-speaking world, we've just had so much time for different groups of people, for different regions to develop their own dialects. And I mean, nowadays it's already kind of gone back a lot compared to what it was like hundreds of years ago. But that really hasn't been able to happen in the US. People just came over to the US and tried to find a common language, first of all. So there hasn't really been time for them to develop their own little regional dialects and accents. And it's probably not even going to happen in the future because everything's going to get globalized even more. But yeah, in Germany, back in the day when there was no communication across borders, or like not even between villages or different cities, it was very easy for them to develop their very own way of pronouncing things and own vocabulary, etc.
Yeah.
So that's why we have all those very distinct German dialects, accents, very different vocabulary. Like, as I said, sometimes each village has their own expressions. That's just a historical thing.
I think maybe we should start in Bavaria because I feel like when I think about German dialects, Bavarian is one that comes to mind pretty quickly. Not only because I live here and have a lot of contact with Bavaria, but I would say it's one of the strongest dialects that you'll hear in Germany.
It's definitely also one that I think many Americans know as the stereotypical German dialect, just because I think there's like a bunch of media and pop culture that refers to Bavarians, also like Bavarian culture and outfits and stuff like that. And also, I mean, you and I have mentioned Bavaria as a region and Bavarian as a language quite a lot because I'm from there and you live there now and you have a lot of friends there too. So it's just... the main dialect for us. Yeah. So we apologize to all the other Germans who live in other parts of Germany. We're going to try and talk about your dialects and accents too. But yeah, this is just what we deal with on the daily pretty much.
Yeah. I would say, and like you mentioned, in Bavaria, there are a couple different accents or a couple different dialects that you'll hear. What comes to mind? Not just
a couple.
Yeah. I mean, what comes to mind is, I mean, I feel like each city has its own accent. Or own dialect, but what I think of is Oberbayerisch, Niederbayerisch, Oberpfälzisch, Fränkisch.
And I think, isn't there even Oberfränkisch and there's Oberfranken and Unterfranken. I don't know if the difference. Dialects.
And then if you go towards like Augsburg, it's more closer to Schwäbisch. So it's Augsburgerisch. But so those are the main dialects I would say that you hear in Bavaria. What I feel like and what most people speak in and around Munich, I would say more around Munich, is Oberbayerisch, which is like Upper Bavarian.
Exactly. And usually when we talk about the Bavarian dialect, or even in German when we say Bayerisch, we usually refer to that, the Upper Bavarian, the Oberbayerisch. to clarify that.
Maybe some typical things that you hear. It's funny that you were talking about this with African American vernacular English as well, is the double negation. That's definitely something that you have in Bavarian. So,
Yes.
ich hab kein Geld nicht.
Yeah.
Which is I don't have any money. Yeah, neda.
Yeah.
But it's the double negation is something that exists there as well. So I don't have no money.
There's a lot. I mean, they just, a lot of it actually is kind of similar to English in a way. If you just look at the written dialect, I mean, you don't see dialect in a written way a whole lot, but you can see it when people just communicate with each other on social media or text messages or something. But in Bavarian, you would, instead of ich, you would just say I, which is literally just the letter I, just like in English.
Yeah.
Instead of mein, we would say mai, which also is pretty much like in English. So a lot of the endings get dropped in Bavarian. And then a lot of the vowels just get twisted into a different vowel. A lot of the diphthongs get twisted. So there's obviously certain rules, like these dialects are definitely dialects that have grammatical rules.
Yeah.
If you look at them, it's not like you're taught these rules. It's just like if you analyze it, there's certain patterns that people use.
Yeah, like
an
EU, which in standard German, the combination of an E and an U makes an oi sound. In Bavarian, it tends to make an I sound. So like a frohes neues Jahr, people say, gut's nice.
Sounds like nice.
Yeah, it sounds like nice. What are some other things?
There's just so many.
Yeah, an EI, which normally would make an I sound in German. So like mine, it's not a great example.
Oh, maybe kein.
Kein would be core. So an EI turns into an OA.
And then they also drop the N.
Exactly. But
and then there's just so many different vocabulary. You can't say vocabulary, so there's just so many different words.
Yeah. Your greeting that you always use, servus, is very, very typical Bavarian.
Or Austrian. One of the things is like
Southern.
Obviously within the German-speaking world, you can't really talk about clear borders because those borders don't exist. Like just because this is the border of the state within Germany doesn't mean that that's where the dialect is going to switch. Yeah. And the same goes with country borders. So Bavarians and Austrians or Upper Austrians have a lot in common culture-wise and also language-wise.
Yeah, definitely.
Then when you go deeper into Austria, you can like notice the shift even more extreme. And the same if you go into Bavaria and then go north or go west, you can just hear the shift.
Yeah, like for example, Heim or like daheim in Bavarian would be daheim. In Upper Austrian, it's daheim, but in Niederösterreich, then it turns in daheim.
Daheim, yeah.
Yeah. Another place where they say servus is Baden-Württemberg.
Do they?
Yep, they do.
At least the Schwäbisch dialect, or
now you're making me question myself because the people that I know who are from there who say it live in Munich.
Okay. They might have picked it up, but also dialects and accents get mixed together all the time, so it's totally possible.
Yeah.
I guess I just didn't know about that.
Yeah.
Specifically.
But talking about kind of the Schwäbisch dialect, something I think it's a funny dialect.
It sounds really cute to me, honestly.
Yeah, it's unfortunately it's hard for me to take them seriously.
Yeah, that's true. I think a lot of the dialects are hard to think about seriously, which is one of the image things that I wanted to talk about later. But I think Schwäbisch just sounds particularly cute.
Yeah.
Which also has to do with them in a lot of cases using the, what's it called, the like Verniedlichungsform.
The diminutive, I think.
You would know. I don't know. I never learned that.
The things that
English doesn't really have it.
It's the form of a word that makes it small.
Yeah, and they use that a lot in Schwäbisch. So I think that's maybe why it sounds kind of cute.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I think
like they just add le to the
exactly. That's what I was gonna say. You hear a lot of le, bischle.
Yeah.
Another thing you just said it there too is whenever there's just one s, oftentimes it turns into an sch or it makes a sh sound.
Yeah.
So like
weich. Das ist bei.
Yeah. Ish.
Yeah.
So weist turns to weich and ist turns to ish. So it just sounds, and they have like a little sing song to it too.
Yeah. The intonation is very different.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I don't have a lot of other examples of what like Schwäbisch really sounds like. It's part of the Alemannisch language family, though, so it shares a lot of similarities with Swiss German dialects.
True.
Some other things in Baden-Württemberg, there's also another dialect which I don't hear a huge difference between the two, but Badisch is also a dialect that's spoken there. Do you know of any other dialects that are spoken in Baden-Württemberg that they're known for? Schwäbisch is definitely the biggest cultural export, we'll say, from Baden-Württemberg.
I'm unfortunately not a language expert at all, and I'm not really a Germany expert in that way. Like I know there's many people who know exactly what each region is known for, and I personally don't know a lot about that. So, I don't know of anything else.
No worries.
I mean, of course, then going north,
there's Hessisch.
Yeah, we can talk about Hessisch first too. I was first thinking about like the Cologne region, Rheinland-Pfalz too. So there's like Pfälzisch. There is Kölsch. How do you say the Kölner
Colonies?
accent,
I don't know. I have
Colonisch.
No clue. Colonisch, yeah.
That's also a very particular accent that or dialect that many people know of within Germany, and so is Hessisch, as you just mentioned.
Yeah.
Hessisch also sounds very funny to me.
Yeah, I think Hessisch is very funny to me.
Hessisch.
Ich
bin der Madden und ich spreche Hessisch.
What I wrote in my notes is sounds like a drunk person. That's what it sounds like to me.
Yeah, in a way.
Because in standard German you would say Hessisch, but they say Hessisch. It's like very runny, slurring your words.
Yeah. And like it's typical for them to also speak a little more slowly. But of course, we're not trying to bash any dialects here, guys.
No.
Like this is just. I would also say that Bavarian probably sounds like a farmer.
Yeah. No.
At first,
yeah.
like
Bavaria
like
or Bavarian is like the southern accent, like in the U.S. Sounds a little.
Yeah.
Sounds a little more rural.
Yeah.
Uneducated, maybe.
Yeah.
Is the
stereotype.
Okay.
What other dialects did you write down?
Other ones that I have written down is Sächsisch, Saxonian. They get
also
a lot of
funny.
They get a lot of shit for their dialect.
They do.
But I find it really endearing.
the least sexy dialect within Germany, I believe.
Yeah, and I've talked about the fact that I lived in Erfurt, which isn't a part of Saxony. It's a part of Thuringia, is the name of the state. But the accent in the Erfurt region is more similar to Sächsisch. So I'm used to hearing that sound more. And I always tell the story about when I first started at my internship there. And a guy told me, wenn du zu lange hier arbeitest, dann kriegst graue Haare. And I didn't understand what he said. And what he said in standard German would be, wenn du zu lange hier arbeitest, dann kriegst du graue Haare. Or in English, if you work here too long, then you'll get gray hair. But his pronunciation of graue Haare was graue Haare. And I couldn't understand him.
Yeah, I totally get that. I probably wouldn't have been able to understand him either.
Yeah. I think they call like Brötchen or Semmel, they call them Bämme, I'm pretty sure.
Oh, I didn't even know that. Oh, that's actually one of those words. I mean, as we said, there's, compared to the US, there's just so many different words for different things. So it's an endless list. But one of the words that would be kind of comparable to like the whole soda thing in Germany is like the word for a bread roll.
Yeah.
So Brötchen, Semmel, Weckle, and what do they call it?
Bämme, I think.
Oh, there's also, for some reason, bread plays a really big role in these like different word discussions that, of course, like as you said, there's like these quizzes in the US where you can click, how do you say this? How do you say this? And then they tell you what region you're from. And I know some of these things exist with, first of all, Semmel, Brötchen, Weckle, Bämme, whatever. And this also exists with, which is also bread related, with the end piece of a bread loaf.
Yeah.
Which apparently each region has their own word for it, but even within like the same dialects group, they have different words in the different villages and
What do you
cities.
call it again?
Ich würde sagen, oh, now I have to think. Scherzal.
Yeah, exactly. I would probably, since not only am I not a native speaker, but I don't have a huge, heavy dialectal influence on my German, I would probably just call it like die Endscheibe.
Yeah. There's so many words for it.
Yeah.
I can't think of the other ones right now. I've read them several times.
Yeah.
But if you want to Google it, like there's so many discussions on the internet, on like social media, of people like discussing which one is the right one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe some other dialects then moving past. Oh, with Sächsisch, it also kind of sounds more slurred to me. And their consonants, I feel like, are softer than in other dialects. So like I've heard like a comedian talk. I don't remember the joke, and it doesn't matter. But mixing up Griechen with Griechen, die Griechen, die Griechen, Griechen.
Yeah.
So
But I think you have that in other dialects as well, like in Hessisch, as we said.
I think that's a pretty mid, like Central Germany thing.
Yeah. Like, for example, what I did earlier was like a little, like, the Germans among you will probably have recognized it. I kind of impersonated a German comedian who used the whole Hessisch accent as his,
his gag
trait. Wiedererkennungswert. What do you call it?
His, oh gosh, what's it called? His trademark, if you will.
His trademark, yeah. So his name is Martin, but he calls himself Muddin.
Okay.
With double D, because they also do that thing where like they don't pronounce the consonants very hard.
Yeah. Which is also something that's tricky, because in some Fränkish dialects they also do that too, which is more in that general area.
Oh, we haven't talked about Fränkish at all. This is funny because, like, I mean, Schwäbisch, as we said, exists within Bavaria too, but then Fränkish exists in Bavaria as well, and they're actually a pretty big part of Bavaria, but they're often overlooked because they sound very, very different. Like their accent or dialect doesn't sound related to Upper Bavarian at all. One main thing that they do is they roll their R's very, very noticeable. Yeah,
so it's
that's
not
just
Fränkish, it's Fränkisch.
Fränkisch. And then also they don't pronounce the K, they pronounce it like a G, as we just said too. Fränkisch. Yeah.
I actually worked with someone who was from Nürnberg, or that general area where they speak Fränkisch. And I had trouble understanding him sometimes, just because we talked on the phone a lot, and I really struggled sometimes, just because it sounded like he not only did he speak with more of a dialect, but he also was a really bad mumbler, which doesn't help.
That doesn't make it better.
No.
No, not at all.
Let's see, moving maybe further north, in Berlin, they have a very distinct accent.
It's called Berlinerisch. So it's really just a thing that they speak in Berlin City, pretty much. And then, I mean, it's kind of similar around Berlin City in Brandenburg, as like Brandenburg, the state. But you can definitely, if you know the region, you can definitely tell the difference between someone coming from Berlin and someone coming from somewhere else in that region.
Yeah. What are some of the, would you say, for Germans, the most distinct features of that accent?
Like a lot of
dialect?
the, like, obviously, like, Icke or Ich instead of Ich, but I think Icke is more, and then like all the, like, for example, the AU diphthong gets O, becomes O, so like Och, and then also they, in a lot of cases, they don't pronounce the F at the end of words, so like Kop, like Fischkopf, or something like that.
I think another
those
really...
are some things that come to mind. Yeah,
one thing that comes to mind for me too is the G turning into a J. So a G turning into a Y. So like...
Genau.
Jut. What were some of the other things? Ich bin gegangen. I don't know if they would say that, but would be...
Yeah.
But that would be the G being replaced by a
they would definitely say
sound.
it's somewhat like you said.
Yeah. I'm not good at imitating that accent because I don't have much contact with it.
Yeah.
But for Americans, though, or for English speakers or non-native German speakers, I remember when I first started learning, I could barely differentiate I couldn't tell that they sounded different. To me, it just was German. I mean, obviously, I was learning standard German. But now the more contact I've had and the better my German has gotten, it's like a night and day difference. Like how it's crazy to think, look back and think how I ever could have thought that someone from Berlin sounded the same as someone from Bavaria.
Yeah, it's just you don't know the language as well yet, and you don't have that feeling for the language and for the different sounds that people make in that language. I mean, that's why people struggle with imitating the pronunciation of a language when they first learn it, because they can't even hear the difference. And I know many, many people learning German who, even years into their German learning journey, they can't hear the difference between an U and an Ü.
Yeah.
So like the U and then the umlaut U with the two dots. And that's just the thing, that if you can't hear the difference, then obviously you're not going to be able to tell if someone has an accent or not.
Yeah.
That's just, a skill that many people get over time, or some people also don't really have a talent for that in a way. And then maybe they won't be able to hear that even after years. And I think it's also closely related to the accent that the person has themselves. I think if, there's many people who live in a country for several decades and never lose their native accent, which is not a problem at all. Like, nobody's forcing you to. But many people try and can't lose the accent. And I think those are the kind of people who usually they don't hear the difference between what they say and what the natives around them say. And so it's just, a talent or a skill that certain people have and other people don't have that.
Yeah, no, definitely.
And at the beginning of learning a language, I think nobody has it.
No, it definitely takes time to develop that.
Yeah.
I think another interesting thing is that in Germany, at least in the south, there's more dialect spoken than the north. So so far we kind of started in the south of Germany with our dialect journey and have worked our way north towards Berlin. But even further north from Berlin and kind of northwest, you get pretty standard German. I mean, Hanover is known for having the standard pronunciation of German. But a big part of that is because a lot of them had to learn German, because in the north there were a lot of other languages that were spoken they're still Germanic languages, but Plattdeutsch wasn't necessarily just a dialect, but also there were like the Frisian language in that area.
Which still exists, though.
It
still
does.
exists as a dialect. And I think in that region, a lot of people very much speak that dialect still, like very heavily. And Plattdeutsch, too, is like, it's a very, very strong dialect and or its own language. Like, the thing with like dialects is, in a lot of cases, it is the same thing as a different language. It just sometimes is called a different language or sometimes it isn't. But with Plattdeutsch, I would say it's more like a different language than a German dialect. But I know that many people up there, like many families, have tried to keep that going for a long time. It's just not that, like, not a lot of people up north speak those dialects and accents in public life a whole lot anymore.
Yeah, I know.
It's more like within certain communities they do.
Exactly. And I know that like some of our friends who are from up north, like they say that their parents can either speak or understand it. And most people our age, I feel like, really don't speak the dialect. They'll understand it, but speaking it is becoming less and less common. So that's why Bavarians tend to be really proud of their dialect, because they don't want it to die out. And that's something that has happened in the north more, is that you hear less and less dialect. Yeah.
So Plattdeutsch is in English often called Low German. And it's very, very difficult to understand for people who aren't from that region. It's a little similar to Dutch. So it sounds kind of like a mix of English and German in a way, and it has a very different pronunciation. And what I find funny is in connection with this whole like Low German thing, because I have different points that I wrote down for this episode. And one thing is that we've referred to Standard German a few times in this episode. And in German, we call that Hochdeutsch, which would translate to High German in English. But many English-speaking people think of this distinction between Low German and High German, that if they approach a German with that, the German will not know what they're talking about, because that is not really a thing that, like, not really a way that we perceive our language. Distribution or map in Germany, that there is like Low German and High German. Pretty much what happened over time is that High German used to be the kind of German that was spoken in the southern parts, middle, like central and southern parts
In the
of
higher
Germany
altitudes.
compared to northern Germany, where they said like that was Low German, which like Plattdeutsch also like Platt means flat, so like flat German in a way. But over time, this really has developed to like this Hochdeutsch dialect became the standard German dialect or pronunciation. So nowadays, every German that says Hochdeutsch just means standard German. So I think that's a very important thing for people to know. And if you say Low German to a German, they will not know what you talk about.
No, and that happened to me as well. I definitely know what you're talking about with the whole like Low German and like Americans asking, oh, do you speak Low German or High German? Or I specifically remember when I first started learning German and I was like talking to my dad about different pronunciation things because he took German in school. He pronounced things more American with a stronger accent, but I was really trying to speak with it as standard of an accent as possible. And he was like, well, I think we just pronounced it differently because I think we were taught Low German. And like that's just something that's for whatever reason is in the American psyche about the German language that there's like this weird differentiation between High German and Low German, which doesn't really exist.
No, really Low German is just one very specific dialect that is only spoken in a very small region of Germany, and as we said, isn't really spoken publicly anymore at all. It's more like a cultural artifact that people are trying to keep, which is awesome. But yeah, it's not the question whether you learned Low German or High German.
Yeah. Do you know anything in any Platt or anything in the north?
No, I mean, not really. There's some things that I do understand when I hear it. I mean, like, just in the north, it's kind of hard to differentiate because obviously there's, like, Hamburgerisch, which, like, I understand them. Like, they will say things like Schiedwetter, which, like, Schied is, like, an old way or, I think, like, dialect way for them to say, like, I don't know where it comes from. I think
What does it mean? I've never heard that.
Like bad weather.
Okay, like shit.
Like pretty much,
like
it's almost
weather.
like shit weather, but it doesn't come from shit though. I kind of forget where it comes from. Moin moin.
I was gonna say moin moin
obviously
is something that's very. Moin is in the north, or moin is to the north. What servus is to the south.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously by greetings and farewell phrases, you can also tell the difference very easily. Like it's kind of like those phrases, and then what they call a bread roll is the fastest ways to tell where someone's from within Germany. Because in Bavaria we also have the formal greeting Grüß Gott, which means greet God, which nobody would say outside of Bavaria, I don't think. Then many people in other regions of Germany will just say Guten Tag as like the formal way of saying hello, which I don't think I've never said that in my life.
I know in, for example, I think it's Nordrhein-Westfalen, so North Rhine-Westphalia, that people tend to also say Guten Tag. You'll hear like
Tag,
Tag, which is something I associate with the Northwest. But yeah, I mean, unfortunately, I haven't had a ton of contact with the North. I've visited Hamburg, but other than that, it's mostly been through our friend Niklas that I've gotten some exposure to more of that sound. But yeah, I mean, that's obviously not all of the dialects in Germany. Or are we forgetting some that you wanted to mention, Feli?
I mean, we're definitely forgetting a whole lot of them because there's so many. And we apologize to all of you who are from a region and we didn't mention your dialect. I actually wanted to get back to Plattdeutsch because you asked me about it. And I did look up a few phrases that I thought would be fun to go through.
Yes, please do.
I kind of have to find them again. Maybe, I don't know if you want to read them too and I can send them to you. We can read through them together. Or do you want me to try and pronounce it and you see if you can understand it?
Let's try that.
Okay, I'll try. Okay, here's the first one. Hochdeutsch kann jeden Dösbattel snacken. Platt ist für de Pleatschen.
So, Hochdeutsch...
Did you hear me?
Say it one more time.
Hochdeutsch kann jeden Dösbattel snacken. And I'm probably pronouncing that totally wrong. I'm just reading what I see here. And then the second part goes, Platt ist für de Pleatschen.
Okay, so I understood the first part generally. So Plattdeutsch is so Plattdeutsch kann jeder sprechen, kann jeder Vollidiot sprechen,
it
probably.
Was Hochdeutsch.
Hochdeutsch. Essentially saying that standard anyone, or I don't know what the something doodled was.
Dösbaddel.
Yeah, I don't know what that means, but I'm guessing it means some sort of idiot or anyone.
Yeah, Dummkopf. Yeah.
So any idiot could speak Standard German,
Yeah.
and then Plattdeutsch.
Platt is für die Pleatschen.
And then I don't know what Pleatschen means, but
Hier steht, Platt ist für die Pfiffigen.
Okay.
So Low German is for the clever ones or smart ones. Or,
okay, interesting.
Yeah. It's funny because I think I totally know the word Dösbaddel. And I think it's from a German kids show called Kapitän Blau. Wait, is it
Captain
called Captain
Blaubeer?
Yeah, Captain Blaubeer.
Yeah. That's
Yeah,
funny.
and because he's like this ship captain, but he's a blue bear, so he's called Captain Blue Bear. And he speaks with some kind of northern accent. It's hard for me to say now because I haven't watched it in so long, but I'm pretty sure he always used the word Dösbaddel.
Okay, interesting.
So I
I've
always
never heard
watch
that
that
word
as a kid.
before. But like schnacken is a funny word to talk about too, because I mean schnacken
Schnacken, yeah.
means to speak or to talk.
Yeah, here steht Snaken in Plattdeutsch,
snaken.
but
Okay.
Snaken. But I mean, Schnacken is
Yeah.
also what they say in northern Germany and in other parts of Germany.
But that's a very northern word, I feel like. Schnacken.
yes.
Do you have another example?
Here's a shorter one. It says, okay, this is easy. Geht nicht, Gift nicht.
So, geht nicht, Gift nicht?
Gift nicht.
I'm guessing that is gibt's nicht.
Gibt's
So
nicht.
yeah, geht
Even though-
nicht, gibt's nicht. So
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know how to translate that.
Yeah. Basically, it's just a saying that we use when someone says there's
Like,
no
don't give up,
can do. Yeah. Like you can do it.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I pronounced that right because it's spelled with Gei, and for some reason I want to pronounce it
Geift.
gate,
Yeah.
but it might be pronounced geit. Geit nicht. Aber I kind of think it's probably pronounced gate.
Yeah, I think
Whatever.
I don't know. Yeah.
Okay, I'm trying to do the short ones.
Yeah.
Ik heb die leef.
Or
Ik heb die leef.
so I'm guessing that's probably very close to English. I have to leave.
No.
Okay. Well, ich means I. Heft, I'm guessing
Hef.
haben.
Die.
Die is the.
Different die.
Oh.
Think of Bavarian.
Oh, okay. You. Oh, ich hab dich lieb.
Leef. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I
Yeah.
love you is what it means.
No, it literally just translates to ich hab dich lieb, but maybe it does mean I love you. I don't know. I mean, yeah, so why I said no is because in German there's a differentiation between
Yeah.
ich hab dich lieb, I
Ich
like
liebe
you
dich.
a lot, and ich liebe dich, I love you. Like, ich hab dich lieb is something that you'll say to your friends.
Yeah.
It's not as strong as I love you, and I love you in German is used a little more in the romantic context.
Yeah.
As compared to American English, where people will say, I love you and love
Yeah.
you, love ya, to pretty much any friend or relative that they have.
Yeah. You have the same differentiation in Spanish between amar y querer. But yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I think maybe that's gonna be it with Plattdeutsch for today because as Josh announced at the beginning of the episode, we had an idea because obviously now we've kind of talked about different dialects, a little bit about different accents, and some of them we've tried to imitate them, but we've definitely failed. And for some of them, we didn't even try. So we thought it would be a lot of fun to just dedicate a whole episode to different dialects, both in the States and in Germany, and to have different people give us a little example, just like, one sentence or two sentences of how they would say something in their dialect and their accent. And we have some friends that we're going to ask to record something for us, but we'd also like to give you guys the chance to be a part of this too.
Yeah, so we're super excited about this idea and would love to have you guys participate. We recently changed our website and our hosting site for our podcast to anchor.fm. And on this website, there's the opportunity for you guys to send us voice messages. So if you want to be a part of this episode that's coming out, and if you have a strong English accent, we love it. If you have a strong German dialect, we want to have your guys' examples. So please make sure that you send either some sort of recording to our email address or to this anchor.fm website.
Yeah, there's just a button.
Yeah.
So you just go to anchor.fm/understanding train station. It's also linked everywhere below. And then there's going to be this option, I think, right on the homepage of the website where you can message us and you can send us a voice recording. So I don't know, should we give them like a prompt of what it should say? Or should everyone be able to tell us something different in their
I think
dialect
everyone
and
should be able to
accent?
tell us something different.
Maybe say something that's typical.
Yeah, something
What you
typical
would
for
say
your
is
region.
typical.
And then also, if it's something that's really different than the standard version, please make sure to give us the standard version so we can make sure that people know what that means too.
Yes, please. Or you can also just, give us the dialect version, then give us the standard German or standard English version, and then if you can, maybe even translate it to the other language, like
That would
to
be great.
English or German. Or if not, then we're gonna do that for you. But I think the episode is really just gonna be us going through different dialects and just trying to figure out if we can understand what they're saying, maybe even trying to guess where the dialect or accent is from. Maybe, guys, when you do this, we're just giving more and more instructions, but I'm just thinking of this while I speak. So maybe if you guys do that, give us the sentence first and tell us the dialect afterwards so that we can guess first if we can find out where it's from and then let us know where it's from afterwards.
Yes, I'm really looking forward to this episode. So please make sure you guys participate because we want as big of a pool of dialects as we can get.
Yeah, well, before we wrap this up, I did want to talk about like these bigger topics related to dialects and accents. So we've covered how like in Germany, dialects and accents are a lot more prevalent than they are in the States. We also talked about how it's definitely spoken more in rural areas. And actually, regarding that, I found a really interesting quote that I copy and pasted somewhere. Where is it? Here. I thought this was really interesting. I had no clue. So I'm going to read it in German first and then tell you in English. So this is just from an article that I found. And it says, Die deutsche Standardsprache wurde noch in den 1950er Jahren von den meisten Bewohnern des deutschen Sprachraumes eher als fremde Sprache empfunden, insbesondere im niederdeutschen Sprachraum. Heute vielleicht nur noch von vielen Deutschschweizern, Süddeutschen, Westösterreichern und Südtirolern. So what it's saying is the German Standard language was perceived as something foreign to them up until the 1950s, so to most people living in Germany. And today, that's probably only the case for Swiss people, for South Germans, for some people from West Austria and South Tyrol, which is a part in Italy where they also speak German. Which I think is crazy that like up until the 1950s, dialects were what was way more common than the standard German. And within just a few decades, that has changed drastically because both of my parents grew up with a standard German pretty much. Like my dad grew up with both Bavarian and standard German, but my parents grew up in the 60s and 70s. So, that must have been a big change. Also, of course, I have to say the disclaimer, both of my parents grew up in Munich. And as we said, there's always a big difference, and probably there always has been a big difference between the city regions, so the urban areas and the rural areas. So obviously, probably if you go back to the 1970s and you go to a more rural area, probably nobody spoke standard German there.
Yeah.
But yeah, in the city, they definitely did. So I thought that was crazy to think of
that's
because
a crazy,
nowadays...
Yeah, that's a crazy fact to think about. I mean, it kind of goes back to what I was saying about that's why I think so many people in the North tend to speak more standard German now, because I think there was a pretty big campaign of pushing standard German back during that time frame. And I think it was more embraced in the North than it was in the South. But it's interesting to see how now, how Hochdeutsch, the standard German, is perceived more as something foreign in the South as opposed to in the North.
I don't think that's the case. I think they're just referring to, like nowadays at least, they're referring to how basically in the South, dialects and accents are still more common than they are in the North. So even though they've disappeared a lot down there too, they're still more common, and especially in some rural areas. You're definitely the exotic person if the only dialect and accent that you speak is standard German, because many people there do speak a dialect or an accent in their everyday life with their family and friends. And then a lot of them, not everyone, but a lot of them are able to then switch to standard German, but only do it by choice and only do it in certain situations.
Yeah.
But also what I read is that the reason for dialects being more common in the South is because industrialization came to the South a lot later,
that makes
time-wise.
sense.
So in the North, like cities and those kind of things were more common a lot earlier. So like everyone was kind of forced to speak standard German a lot earlier. And then in the South, people were still farmers and just, talking to the people on their farm and nobody else.
Yeah.
So I think that is what I read was one of the main reasons. When it comes to like image and everything, and like when dialect is spoken, like basically what I want to talk about is how are dialects and
Perceived.
accents in general perceived in Germany, and then also in comparison to the US.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I can speak from the U.S. perspective, definitely. And unfortunately, I don't have a huge education in all of the dialects in Germany or the history of it. So I'm really glad that you did some of that research to look into kind of some of that history, and then also just talking about that difference, because for me, at least in my background, I speak this way with my family and in professional settings. Because I speak very much the general American accent. But I do know a lot of people, especially some more of my Black friends who are, and also some of my Latino friends, they definitely code switch is what it's called. So they have their way of they have two different ways of speaking, one with friends and family and one with the standard professional English, if you will. And I definitely would say that if you speak a non-standard variant of English in the U.S., you definitely looked at differently. That it's like somewhat more exotic, and there definitely is a push to speak more professional standard English, quote unquote, at least in the workplace. And dialects and accents definitely tend to be looked down upon more. I think. At least when I think of like the New England, you think of more of like the mobsters have the really strong New York accent. You think of the Irish mob up in Boston, they all sound very, very more dialectal, very regional. And then in the South, there's definitely more of the perception of the Southern accent is uneducated, backwards, stuck in time, very much kind of like the Confederate States. And those are definitely stereotypes that aren't true. I know people who are very, very smart who have very strong Southern accents. And I think it's interesting how those stereotypes develop. I don't really know. It would be interesting to learn more about how those stereotypes developed over time. But those are definitely strong stereotypes that are embedded into American culture.
Yeah. No, I'm pretty sure it has to do a lot with the like agriculture culture. Like how, people who used to be simple people and who didn't have like an office job or like work at a factory or be in the cities, like those people who were out on the countryside still, that those people had those accents, and the people who went into the cities kind of had to adapt a little more to be understood by others. And so maybe that's where it comes from, that like, the farmers, our agriculture, those are like considered the uneducated people, quote unquote. And so that's why that perception exists, because it's the same in Germany. I would say that especially people who only speak dialect, I would say are definitely considered a little less sophisticated in a way. I hate to like say it like that, because I personally don't have the perception. I just know that perception exists in Germany, and it's definitely existed for a while. And as you said, there was this like big push, and like in schools, you're forced to learn and speak and write in standard German. So in Munich, I mean, I personally grew up with standard German, because in Munich we speak mostly standard German, but there's still people who speak or grew up speaking Bavarian dialect at home, and then they would come to first grade and they would be forced to then pronounce everything differently, because with German too, with the spelling, it's really difficult because you're taught that everything's spelled the way you pronounce it. But then if you pronounce it differently, you're going to end up spelling it wrong. So a lot of the kids who spoke dialect at home had a pretty big disadvantage when it came to spelling, which also, of course, reflected in their grades. And they were basically forced to lose their dialect, which is a very, very sad thing that happens. Yeah. And so, yeah, it's just kind of like the system. And then, of course, media too, just pop culture. There isn't a whole lot of dialect on media channels. I know that recently, though. So this is kind of the status quo, I would say, in Germany. Recently, in the past maybe couple decades or maybe a little bit longer too, I feel like dialects have had a comeback in Germany in a way that they've become cool again. Yeah. At least some of them. I don't know about all different regions, but I know in Bavaria for sure, like people have started to feel a pride for those dialects and for maintaining those dialects, which is awesome. I think that's really, really cool. And I actually, in a lot of cases, have gotten, looked upon because I don't speak. Yeah, because I don't speak Bavarian dialect. So it's kind of taken a turn recently, but I think it hasn't arrived in like the whole society yet. This is more like a pop culture thing, kind of like among young people more. I don't think in my parents' generation it was a question of being cool to speak dialect. But in my generation, it's become that again. And I also know that in media, because I mentioned that too, because I used to work in like the field of radio stations, and I know that for a lot of people who want to work in the radio but who have an accent, not even just a dialect, but just a slight accent. For example, if people roll their R's in Bavaria, it used to be a very big no-go for them. It was like, okay, if you want to be on the air yourself, you have to either lose that or you can never be on the air. Wow. It has changed. It's still pretty much like that. And I know a lot of people, a lot of radio hosts personally, who then went to speech therapy and tried to lose it. And some of them actually lost it, and some of them didn't make it.
That's crazy.
But I think that's sad. I do understand it somewhat with dialects. Like, of course, you don't want to have a strong dialect on your radio station that can be received in entire Germany or something. Of course, that would basically limit down your audience to a very small group of people. But if it's just a slight,
small little thing like your
slight
R,
accent. Yeah, like people will still understand it. So I think it's kind of sad, but some radio stations and also local TV stations in Germany have recently started, or I don't want to say recently, but, over the past, 10, 20 years, have started to make it a thing on purpose to like hire hosts who have that accent or, who speak with an accent when they speak standard German. Like you can kind of hear it just with certain things that they pronounce. And then they're also able to switch dialect so that whenever someone calls in and speaks with the local dialect, that then the host can actually reply in dialect too.
Yeah, I think that's where I've heard it the most too, on the radio, where like you said, the radio speakers will have very clear standard German, and then someone will call in more of a dialect. I just don't think about it, but you're 100% right. Yeah. That's funny. I haven't thought about that before. They do, I'm pretty sure, a very similar thing in the UK because they have a lot of regional accents that are much stronger than in the US. And for the longest time, I'm pretty sure the BBC, you had to speak, it's called received pronunciation, which is the standard Southern speech or pronunciation of British English. And I'm pretty sure in the recent years, they've been having more and more people on as presenters who speak with more regional accents. So it's just interesting that seems to be a phenomenon across countries too.
Yeah. I mean, maybe it just has to do with trends, because I think just in life in general, the way that trends work is it goes into the one direction and then eventually it's going to turn.
It's the pendulum
Sometimes
swing.
It doesn't turn, but I think in this case, just like keeping up your culture used to be like your local culture, like, traditional clothing and stuff like that in Germany used to be kind of uncool, and why would you do that? Yeah. And now it's become cool again, which I like. At the same time, though, for a lot of local dialects and local traditions, this like shift in direction has come way too late. Like a lot of the dialects are already lost now, and there's only a few people who speak them or nobody who speaks them anymore. Which from just like a linguist perspective is very sad because, yeah, there just used to be so many different dialects. But yeah, when it comes to like those people who know both, like who know both Bavarian and Standard German, it's funny because I would say a few decades ago, at least, now I'm speaking about like my experience in Bavaria. I can't speak of any other regions. But a few decades ago, I would say that those people would mainly speak their dialect. And then when they're forced to, they would speak Standard German. And it would be a pretty big accomplishment that they were even able to switch. And nowadays, it's more the other way around. Like all my friends that I know who grew up with, you know, Bavarian dialect in their home, automatically speak Standard German to other people unless they hear, okay, this person speaks Bavarian as well, or unless it's like their close friends or family and they know that this is the place where I speak the dialect. But it's almost like people were, in a way, not forced, but they kind of feel like they need to hide it almost.
Yeah. I think that's a really interesting perspective, Haley, because for me, in my experience too, like, because I do understand Bavarian pretty well, like, I'm always like, oh, you don't have to speak Standard German with me because people will switch to Standard German. Like, they'll be in the middle of a very heavy Bavarian conversation, then I'll say something, and they switch to Standard German.
Oh.
And I'm like, you guys don't have to do that. Like, I understand you. Like, come on, keep speaking your dialect. Like, I think it's really cool. Yeah. But it's interesting that you point out that seems to be something that probably happens very naturally for them. But yeah, it's crazy. Yeah,
and it's interesting too with some of my friends, like my neighbor who I grew up with, both of her parents speak Bavarian. Not, you know, super, super strong. I mean, they can, but like when they just speak it with me, for example, they still speak it. They don't speak it as strong as they would with each other. But my friend grew up speaking that dialect as well. And I think when she started elementary school is when she kind of dropped it. She can still 100% speak it. She can code switch very easily. Yeah. But she never spoke it with me or with any of her friends. I don't think she speaks Bavarian dialect with her friends. Yeah. And it's like that with also our friend Sabine, for example, and many other people nowadays who are very much able to speak the dialect, but just tend not to at first, which,
just
it used to be the other way around.
Forces, I guess. But yeah, it's interesting that there's been that switch. Dialects is such a big topic that we could talk about this probably for another 3 hours. Sure.
and we have talked about it for a while now. So, yeah, these were just a few things that I really wanted to mention because
I think
the
whole
really question of how important is dialect? What kind of image does it have? And I'm just personally glad that people start to think, at least in southern Germany, that it's cool again. I think it's the same way in other parts of Germany. I don't know what it's like in the US, if that's had a comeback at all.
I don't think so. I mean, my gut feeling says no. My gut feeling definitely says no.
But it's also like there aren't as many like old dialects that could get lost. So maybe, it's a different story here.
But there definitely are a few. And I think we'll link a few videos, or I'll add a few links to some videos that are really informative about dialects in the US, because there are a lot more than one would realize. And a lot of the accents are very, very specific, especially in more of the isolated communities in the southeast coast. Gullah, for example, is a dialect that's spoken, I think, in the Carolinas by a smaller population, and it's crazy. And I'll make sure to link that because I think that video does it more justice than I ever would be able to. So make sure you go check it out.
It's really hard to imitate. Yeah. Also, I know that people are going to comment this, so I'm just going to give a little disclaimer. Yes, we do know that Pennsylvania Dutch exists. We also do know that Texas German exists, because I already know, I can see all the comments. Oh, you need to check out this video. Yeah, I've checked it out before. I've listened to it before. I've also heard it in person, at least Pennsylvania Dutch.
Yeah.
We didn't get into that at all today. Maybe we can get into that a little bit next time. It's two different German dialects that are spoken within the U.S. and that, certain communities living in the U.S. have maintained, which is pretty cool.
Definitely.
And yes, I can understand actually most of it because I know a lot of people are going to ask me that.
So obviously we could talk about this for so much longer, but we appreciate your guys' patience in listening to our point of view about these things. And we want to hear what you guys think also. So there are a few different ways that you guys can reach out to us as you hear every single episode. Nothing has changed. We have a email, which is understandingtrainstation@gmail.com. Where else can they reach out to us, Feli?
An Instagram page at Understanding Train Station. Then, of course, you need to check out anchor.fm/understanding train station, especially if you want to participate in our little accent collection.
Yes, please, and please do.
Yeah, for the episode, you just go on Anchor FM /understanding train station and hit the little send message button. And we really look forward to hearing your voice messages.
Yes, it'll be a lot of fun. In addition to that, we also have a Patreon page set up that if you guys want to support us with a monthly contribution in exchange for some little extra content, we have a monthly Q&A, and we also do a bloopers video, which I think there'll be lots of good bloopers from this episode. What's the website for that, Feli?
Patreon.com/understanding train station. And then there's one last thing where you can also support us, and we very much appreciate it. It's called buymeacoffee.com, and our little URL is /UTS podcast, and you can just give us a one-time donation for, a coffee, a beer, whatever you like. So thank you guys so much for supporting us. Of course, you can also subscribe and give us a review on the podcast streaming platforms like Apple Podcasts and Spotify. As always, I try to put all the information, also like the videos that we just talked about, in the info box on YouTube, but also in like the little description box on the podcast episodes, because I know that a lot of people who listen to that on like the streaming platforms don't even realize that that's a thing. So that is a thing. You just need to find like the little arrow or something where you can open that, and then there's going to be links as well.
Yes.
That you can click on.
Well, cool.
Well, cool. Yeah. Well, thank you guys so much for listening and for watching and for bearing with us through this episode, because it really was a lot of information and a lot of just figuring out how to phrase certain things. And we're obviously not experts, but
and this is our first time actually having a full episode via Zoom call. So we appreciate you guys' patience while we work out these bugs and adjust to the new setup.
So you'll hear us again and see us again if you choose to check it out on YouTube next Thursday. And until then, Servus and Tschüss.
We'll see you then.